Let's start with Booker T. Washington and the Tuskegee Institute. Now, Booker Taliaferro Washington was an American political leader who was an educator, an orator, and author. He was a dominant figure in the African American community in the United States from 1890 to 1915, and he represented the last generation of black leaders born in slavery. He was speaking for those blacks who had remained in the New South in an exploitative, racist environment with the white Southerners. So Washington was able throughout the final 25 years of his life to maintain his standing as a major black leader because of the sponsorship by powerful whites, substantial support within the black community, and his ability to raise educational funds from both groups. But most importantly, Booker T. Washington was known for his accommodation to the social realities of the age of segregation and the black codes. Washington received national prominence for his Atlanta Address of 1895. It is known as the Atlanta Compromise. It attracted the attention of politicians and the public as a popular spokesperson for African American citizens. Washington built a nationwide network of supporters in many black communities, with black ministers, educators, and businessmen composing his core enthusiasts. Now, his Atlanta Compromise speech was accepted. His Atlanta Compromise speech accepted segregation as long as economic development would be allowed, particularly in agriculture in the black communities. He argued that blacks and whites should be separate. If one resisted the apartheid system, of course, the result would be lynching. So Booker T. Washington very clearly understood that to oppose the black codes would mean death. Yet he understood that white supremacy would at least allow blacks some kind of economic independence. Let's take a look at a film clip that addresses the importance of Booker T. Washington.
Without question, Booker T. Washington was the single most well-known African American of his time and may have been the most celebrated black person in the entire world.
Future educator and orator, Booker T. Washington was born a slave on a Virginia plantation on April 5, 1856.
He had to work as a young child, and so he had to juggle hours walking miles and miles to school and then rush back to work. It was very difficult, but he was determined, and that's how he learned to read and write.
Washington was allowed to attend school while working as a servant, and in 1872 he befriended the founder of Hampton Institute, who offered him a scholarship to the school.
The emphasis of that school was on industrial education, on crafts, on technical skills, teaching blacks and the former slaves how to make themselves valuable to the community in a very literal way.
Washington taught at Hampton before being appointed by General Samuel Armstrong to head the newly formed Institute in Tuskegee in 1881.
This was a groundbreaking endeavor because Armstrong trusted this young man to go to Alabama and create something basically out of nothing.
During the post-Reconstruction period, tensions between African Americans and Southern whites were at a fever pitch. But as evidence of racial progress, Washington was asked to address a predominantly white audience at the 1895 Atlanta Expo. The speech turned Washington into a national figure.
The Atlanta Compromise speech is viewed as controversial because he essentially said that politics was for mainstream society and the thing for African Americans was to be separate as the fingers on our hand and not involve ourselves with white society.
Booker T. Washington saw that as a bargain that he had to strike. Those who disagreed with him felt that he had conceded far, far too much to the conservative white South.
In 1900, Washington formed the National Negro Business League to promote the economic development of African Americans. 1 year later, he chronicled his life in the autobiography Up From Slavery.
Booker T. Washington's autobiography was one of the most influential books published by an African American at the turn of the century.
Washington urged African Americans to accept their unequal position in society, while secretly funding litigation for civil rights cases. In 1905, however, leaders such as W.E.B. Du Bois renounced Washington's philosophy and insisted upon full civil rights for all African Americans.
There were people during Washington's time and even now who were very critical of Washington's racial politics. Washington was willing to trade political and voting rights for economic rights. And Du Bois and others said, that's too hard a bargain.
Washington remained principal of Tuskegee and wrote a total of 14 books before his death on November 14, 1915. He was buried on the campus of Tuskegee University.
Okay, that's Booker T. Washington.